Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Claire goes crazy on Audra in Kyle's horror show, Kane and Lily's Mess. Before Claire Newman completely loses her mind for Audra Charles, Kyle Abbott will witness a horror show that he has created. Here is what Y&R has in store for Kane Ashby and Lily Winters, who will also have to deal with a mess. Audra will not succeed in her attempt to win back Nate Hastings. Even though Audra makes an effort to be truthful about all of her plotting, Nate won't believe it's truly sinking in. Nate will make the decision to put Audra behind him and will rely on Victoria Newman to help him. Kyle, on the other hand, will see the tragedy of it all when Claire turns down his proposal of marriage. Kyle will likely increase the tension even further because it appears like Claire will become irate at his strategy. When Kyle turns to his father for guidance, Jack Abbott might fight the need to remark, "I told you so." Although Diane Jenkins Abbott will also share her viewpoint, Kyle might be better off standing aside and giving Claire some space. However, Holden Novak might be prepared to seize this chance, thus there might be an issue. Given their impending formation of a vindictive squad to take on Audra, Claire and Holden will undoubtedly become closer. There will be some crazy moments because Claire will later lose it after an encounter with Audra. Speaking of crazy moments, the Abbott-Newman conflict may be the catalyst for some of them. With Kane's assistance, the Newman clan will have to prepare for their confrontation with Jabbo. Kane has some tricks in his sleeve, though. Kane's emotions may leave him exposed, but Phyllis Summers may endanger his intentions with some daring actions she's going to take. Since Lily still believes Kane is plotting something major, she will corner him and demand a complete confession. Although Kane and Lily will always have strong love for one another, their tense relationship is already a mess and will only get worse. The woman he loves will give him a night of delicious gifts when he returns with Victor. Victor will enjoy being lavished with attention since Nikki will provide a memorable romantic evening. We'll see if Jack would wish to recruit Michael Baldwin, who is across town, in order to acquire some further assistance against Victor. In any case, there will be some significant developments about Victor and his schemes against Jabbo throughout the week of September 8th to 12th. If Victor's unsuccessful marriage proposal results in a love breakup and Claire's heartache, he might also try to get Kyle. Victor might use that as justification to try to force Kyle out of town and execute the $5 million contract. She will be more vulnerable to Claire, Holden, and possibly even Kyle after she returns to Audra. Will Audra underestimate her opponents, even though she will believe she can manage them all? In any event, Audra might put in a lot of effort to help Sally Spectra maximize the launch celebration. There may be tension at that launch party, particularly if Jack and Kyle openly criticize Audra's involvement with Abbott Communications. After all of the awful Kyle news, Victoria will start to worry more and more about Claire. Could Claire's mental health suffer as a result of everything? And Victoria start to worry that she would lose her mind again? At Kyle and Claire's wedding, Audra goes smoldering. If Kyle Abbott's and Claire Newman's wedding goes ahead, it might end badly. After all, Zuleika Silver's character Audra Charles has nothing left to lose and is seeking retribution. Will the wedding in Audra fail? Kyle seeks to prove himself by proposing because Audra has made Claire mistrust what transpired in Nice. Will Claire be swept off her feet or believe it's too soon? Wedding bells may be in Kyle and Claire's future, but it doesn't mean the deal is finalized. We believe that Audra will ensure Claire doesn't get a happy ending either if she is unable to have one with Nate Hastings. Does Audra ruin the wedding of Claire and Kyle? Audra and Victor Newman previously collaborated to destroy Claire, but he let them go when they were defeated. Was he telling the truth, though? Victor might go into revenge mode again after an engagement, and Audra would be the ideal companion for that. Kyle confessed to kissing Audra in Nice in a recent episode, but he kept his half-naked status a secret from Claire. That's ammunition Audra might use to her advantage. Will Claire get married or not? Perhaps Audra should tell Claire about the towel experience since she told Sally Spectra about it. At the very least, it will reveal Kyle's concealment of important information and sow doubt in Claire's mind. We have a sneaking suspicion that Audra won't remain silent while Claire and Kyle have a happy ending, especially considering how strained her own relationship is with Nate Hastings. Naturally, Audra caused all of this herself by refusing to tell Nate about her betrayal in France. What takes place in Genoa City next? Explosive according to spoilers on The Young and the Restless, Audra reacts negatively to Claire's news. Will she choose to speak the truth and possibly embellish it a little bit in order to go for the kill and destroy both her and their lives? Claire Newman's descent into chaos began the moment Kyle Abbott staged his ill-timed, ill-planned marriage proposal, a spectacle he thought would finally cement his future with her. But instead it only magnified every fracture in their fragile relationship. And as Kyle sat waiting for her answer in the candlelit Abbott estate, Claire's silence said more than words ever could. Her hesitation, her darting eyes, the flash of resentment that crossed her face before she even opened her mouth told the story of a woman not flattered by his declaration, but cornered by it, suffocated by the pressure of a promise she wasn't sure she wanted to make. And by the time she uttered a trembling, "Kyle, I can't, not like this," the so-called romantic moment had already unraveled into a horror show, one that would spiral into an even darker fiasco when Audra Charles entered the picture to stir the flames of Claire's breaking psyche, and Kyle, in all his naivete, hadn't anticipated that forcing a commitment out of Claire while his secrets with Audra still lingered would ignite a firestorm. Because Claire, who was already fragile, already suspicious of Audra's constant manipulations, now felt humiliated, betrayed, and cornered, a combination of emotions that made her dangerous, volatile, and capable of unleashing a fury no one in Genoa City was prepared for. Jack Abbott, watching from the shadows of paternal concern, was tempted to mutter his infamous, "I told you so," but refrained, knowing full well that Kyle's heartbreak wasn't just about Claire's rejection but about the ripple effect it would cause through the family, through Jabot, and through the precarious alliances being drawn in Genoa City. And Diane Jenkins Abbott, ever the strategist, warned Kyle that pressing Claire for marriage after the mess in Nice was a catastrophic misstep. Especially with Audra lurking, armed with secrets Kyle conveniently forgot to share, like the half-naked towel incident that, if revealed, would not only obliterate Claire's trust but weaponize her into an unpredictable adversary. Holden Novak, sensing opportunity in Claire's spiraling state, slid closer, offering comfort and understanding, a sympathetic ear and a subtle promise of loyalty. And though Holden's motives weren't entirely pure, his timing was perfect. Because Claire, feeling betrayed by Kyle and mocked by Audra, was desperate for someone to validate her pain. And in that desperation she began to lean on Holden, their bond tightening not out of love but out of shared vengeance, their sights locked firmly on Audra Charles, the woman they both now considered an enemy worth destroying. Audra, for her part, believed she was still the smartest player in the room, confident that she could handle Nate Hastings' rejection, confident she could manipulate her way back into relevance, and confident she could twist Kyle's mistakes into ammunition. But Audra underestimated just how dangerous Claire could be when pushed too far, and one heated encounter between them in Chancellor Winter's offices spiraled out of control when Claire, finally snapping, confronted Audra with a venomous rage that startled even herself, screaming accusations about betrayal, manipulation, and sabotage, shoving files off the desk, throwing Audra's carefully curated image into disarray, and leaving Nate, who happened to walk in mid-explosion, stunned by the unhinged side of Claire he had never seen before, a side that confirmed his fears about her mental stability and made him all the more determined to keep his distance from Audra while solidifying his loyalty to Victoria Newman. Victoria, watching Claire's meltdown from a different perspective, grew increasingly worried that her niece was slipping back into dangerous patterns, afraid that the trauma of her past and the manipulation she endured were resurfacing under the weight of Kyle's proposal disaster, Audra's interference, and Holden's opportunistic influence. And though Victoria wanted to protect Claire, she knew that her hands were tied because Claire wasn't listening to family. She was too consumed with proving Audra wrong, too obsessed with regaining control of a situation spiraling wildly out of her grasp. Meanwhile, Kane Ashby was weaving himself into the Newman-Abbott war in ways few expected, positioning himself as Victor Newman's quiet yet dangerous ally, offering strategies, connections, and schemes that gave the Newman patriarch an edge against Jabot. Though Kane's motives were far from purely loyal, because deep down he wanted to carve out his own power base, to secure a position of influence that would finally free him from the endless cycle of scandal and loss that had defined so much of his life. But as Kane plotted, his emotions betrayed him, particularly when it came to Lily Winters, who saw right through his facade and cornered him in Chancellor Winter's offices late one night, demanding answers, demanding to know what schemes he was running, why he was suddenly working so closely with Victor, and why his every move seemed calculated toward destruction rather than reconciliation. Lily, though torn by lingering feelings for Kane, made it clear that she would not allow him to jeopardize her company, her family, or her own hard-fought independence. But Kane, smirking with that dangerous blend of charm and menace, confessed just enough to unsettle her without revealing the full extent of his plans, leaving Lily in a tormenting limbo where her heart still ached for him but her head screamed warnings about the mess he was creating, a mess that inevitably tangled her back into his orbit whether she wanted it or not. Phyllis Summers, ever the wild card, decided Kane's plotting was the perfect opportunity to insert herself, stirring chaos by threatening to expose his schemes unless he cut her in, daring to take actions bold enough to derail not only Kane's momentum but also Victor's larger designs. And while Kane tried to brush her off, Phyllis made it clear that she wasn't going anywhere, that she would happily play double agent if it meant securing leverage over both the Abbotts and the Newmans, and Kane, realizing how volatile she was, knew that even one slip on her part could blow his entire cover and unravel everything he had built with Victor. Nikki Newman, meanwhile, prepared a lavish romantic evening for Victor, showering him with the kind of affection that bolstered his ego and reminded him why their marriage had endured decades of chaos. But Victor, though basking in Nikki's devotion, never lost sight of his war with Jack Abbott, strategizing his next move and considering whether Michael Baldwin's legal expertise might be a valuable weapon, pondering whether to recruit him into his campaign to finally crush Jabbo and secure Newman dominance once and for all. But Genoa City wasn't ready for what came next, because as Claire and Holden deepened their pact to take down Audra, as Kyle wrestled with humiliation and rejection, as Audra seethed with her own plan to sabotage any chance of Claire and Kyle's happiness, and as Kane and Lily danced on the razor's edge of love and destruction, the stage was set for a launch party at Abbott Communications that would implode into chaos. Audra, tasked with helping Sally Spectra maximize the event, strutted in with her usual confidence, believing she had the upper hand, but when Jack and Kyle took the stage and openly criticized her role, the tension was palpable, and whispers rippled through the crowd that something explosive was about to happen. Claire, already teetering on the edge of sanity, watched Audra with a glare that could cut steel, and when Audra smirked, when Audra dared to mock Claire in front of the room, it was the final straw, the moment Claire snapped publicly, lunging at Audra with a ferocity that shocked everyone, grabbing at her, screaming accusations that left the room in stunned silence before security pulled her away, leaving Kyle mortified, Holden smirking in satisfaction, and Audra shaking with both fear and fury. That night became the talk of Genoa City, a night that cemented Claire's reputation as unstable, that gave Audra the perfect narrative to spin to her advantage, and that left Kyle questioning whether he had lost Claire forever. Victor, ever the opportunist, saw Kyle's humiliation as the perfect excuse to pressure him, dangling the infamous $5 million contract and suggesting that Kyle should consider leaving town before things got worse, while Audra, emboldened by Claire's public breakdown, whispered to Sally about the towel incident in Nice, arming herself with more ammunition to keep Claire off balance, and Holden, ever patient, whispered promises to Claire about standing by her, about helping her fight back, slowly manipulating her into his corner and away from both Kyle and her family. Victoria's fears deepened as she realized Claire's mental health was unraveling, and though she tried to intervene, Claire brushed her off, insisting she was in control even as her actions proved otherwise. The looming wedding between Kyle and Claire, should it even happen, now carried the weight of doom, because Audra, who had nothing left to lose with Nate, was determined to ruin it, to make sure that if she couldn't have her own happy ending, neither could Claire. And the question echoing across Genoa City wasn't whether Audra would interfere, but how catastrophic the fallout would be when she did. The fallout from Claire's public explosion at the Abbott Communications launch party was seismic, sending shockwaves through every faction in Genoa City. And as the dust settled, the question was not whether Claire Newman had gone too far but whether she had crossed a line that she could never return from, because for Kyle Abbott, who had orchestrated the evening as a chance to reclaim his dignity after the botched proposal, the sight of his girlfriend lunging at Audra Charles in front of executives, reporters, and potential investors was nothing short of catastrophic, turning what was supposed to be a polished PR event into a full-blown circus. And while Kyle tried to save face, pulling Claire aside and whispering frantically for her to calm down, the damage was already done. Cameras had captured the spectacle, gossip blogs were spinning the narrative within hours, And Claire's reputation was shredded in the same breath that Audra's image as the wronged victim was amplified. Yet beneath Audra's carefully composed exterior, she was rattled, because even though Claire had humiliated herself, the unfiltered rage in her eyes made it clear that this was no ordinary outburst. This was a declaration of war, and Audra knew she had awakened something primal in Claire that would not be contained by security guards or public shaming. So while she publicly played the victim, privately she began doubling down on her strategy, spreading whispers about Kyle's secret in Nice, casually letting Sally Spectra overhear mentions of the towel incident, planting seeds that would eventually reach Claire's ears in the most devastating way possible, because Audra understood that while she couldn't match Claire's volatility, she could certainly weaponize it. And once Claire found out that Kyle had not only kissed Audra but had been half naked during the encounter, her fragile trust in him would be obliterated. Jack Abbott, furious at the public relations nightmare, berated his son for reckless decision-making, pointing out that Kyle's insistence on proposing to Claire, on pushing her too hard too fast, had triggered a meltdown that now threatened not only his personal life but the stability of Jabot itself, and Diane Jenkins Abbott, though softer in tone, echoed the warning that Kyle needed to stop trying to control situations and start letting things breathe. But Kyle, blinded by humiliation and desperate to salvage both his pride and his relationship, refused to listen, vowing instead to double down and prove to Claire that they belonged together, a vow that would only tighten the noose around them both as the weeks unfolded. Holden Novak, meanwhile, saw the launch party disaster as his golden opening, swooping in to console Claire after her humiliation, telling her that she wasn't crazy, that Audra deserved every ounce of her fury, that Kyle didn't understand her the way he did, and those words, dripping with calculated sincerity, began to seep into Claire's vulnerable heart, carving space for Holden where Kyle once dominated, creating a dangerous triangle where loyalty blurred with obsession and revenge masqueraded as comfort. As this volatile drama unfolded, Kane Ashby's schemes with Victor Newman were simultaneously gaining traction, though Kane found himself juggling more than he had bargained for, because while Victor appreciated his cunning and his ability to strike where Jack Abbott least expected, Kane's own heart was betraying him, pulling him back toward Lily Winters, who wasn't fooled by his games and who pressed harder and harder for the truth, cornering him in late-night confrontations that forced him to choose between honesty and deception, between love and ambition. And though Kane wanted to reassure Lily, to tell her that his schemes were merely business, his inability to fully walk away from the darker side of his ambition left her cold, and their exchanges grew increasingly heated, culminating in a night where Lily demanded to know if he was planning to use her company as collateral in Victor's war against Jabot, and Kane, caught between his love for her and his loyalty to Victor, could only answer with silence, a silence that said more than words ever could. And in that silence Lily saw the truth, that Kane was once again risking everything for power, dragging her into the mess whether she wanted to be there or not. Still, Lily couldn't completely sever herself, because despite her anger, despite her distrust, her heart still burned for Kane, and she hated herself for it, hated the way her pulse quickened when he brushed her arm, the way her stomach twisted when he looked at her with that old spark, and though she told herself she was finished, she knew deep down that the war between them wasn't over, that they were bound together by more than love, bound by history, by family, by unfinished business that neither could escape, and the mess only deepened when Phyllis Summers inserted herself, gleefully poking at Kane's vulnerabilities, threatening to expose his dealings with Victor unless he gave her a cut, promising she could destroy him with a whisper if he didn't comply. And Kane, knowing Phyllis was reckless enough to follow through, reluctantly gave her enough to keep her quiet, though he knew it was only a matter of time before her thirst for chaos turned her into a liability he couldn't control. Meanwhile, Audra was playing her game on multiple fronts, not only weaponizing Kyle's secret against Claire but also scheming to reinsert herself into Nate Hastings' orbit, though her attempts at honesty backfired spectacularly when Nate, already disgusted by her previous betrayal in France, made it clear that nothing she said could rebuild the trust she had shattered, and when he turned his focus back to Victoria, leaning on her as a partner both in business and in life, Audra felt the sting of rejection sharpen into vengeance, convincing herself that if she couldn't have Nate, if she couldn't win back his trust, she would at least ensure that no one else enjoyed a happy ending either, especially not Claire Newman, the woman who had humiliated her and who was now foolish enough to dream of marrying Kyle Abbott. The irony, of course, was that Claire's own mental stability was hanging by a thread, and Victoria, increasingly worried, began confiding in Nikki about her fears, admitting that she could see the signs of Claire unraveling, that she could see the danger in her eyes, the way she oscillated between fierce determination and manic instability, and Nikki, though sympathetic, warned that sometimes love and support weren't enough, that sometimes people had to hit bottom before they could climb back. A warning that would soon prove chillingly prophetic. As Kyle tried to piece together his dignity, he clung harder to the idea of marriage, convinced that if he could just push through the chaos, if he could just get Claire to the altar, everything would settle into place. But what he didn't see, what everyone else could see so clearly, was that the very act of pushing was what was driving Claire further away, and with Audra whispering poison in her ear, with Holden fanning the flames of her resentment, and with her own insecurities gnawing at her, Claire began to spiral further, lashing out not only at Audra but at Kyle himself, accusing him of betrayal, of secrets, of manipulation. And though Kyle tried to deny, tried to soothe, the cracks widened until the idea of a wedding became less a dream and more a ticking time bomb. Whispers began circulating through Genoa City that if Kyle and Claire did make it down the aisle, it would end in disaster. And the whispers weren't wrong, because Audra was already plotting her move, rehearsing in her mind the perfect moment to drop her bombshell, to tell Claire in the most public, most devastating way possible that Kyle had hidden the truth about their night in Nice, that he hadn't been fully honest about what happened, and once that truth came out, Claire's fury would be unstoppable. Victor Newman, watching all of this unfold, saw an opportunity in Kyle's weakness, deciding that his humiliation was the perfect justification to push him out of town, to pressure him with the infamous $5 million contract, to use his shame as leverage to tighten the Newman grip on Genoa City. And with Kane by his side feeding him insights, Victor was confident that Jack and Jabbo wouldn't know what hit them.